Good morning, and welcome to the Competitive Advantage Talks presented by Ticketmaster. My name is Frank Rinaldi, and I'm a second-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's presentation, When Less is More, How the NBA Could Be More Like PTV, presented by ESPN. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, NBA writer from ESPN, Kevin Arnovitz.
Thanks. Nobody can tell you why there's an 82-game schedule. Nobody at the league. Historians aren't entirely sure. All we know is that the 1967-68 season, this current 82-game format, was adopted. Now, the question I want to discuss today is, should the NBA shorten its regular season? I don't think there's an objectively correct answer to the question of how many games the season should be, but I think we could probably all agree that there's some objectively incorrect answers. For instance, how about 16? I mean, this is what the NFL does. This is a league so profitable, it doesn't even need local broadcast revenue. So profitable, they can fling the gates open 8 times a year and still profit. The NFL practically has a national holiday in this country on Sundays during the fall, and it's the scarcity of the product that really drives that. Now, could the NBA go to 16 games? Probably not. I mean, this is a league that subsists on 3 nationally televised doubleheaders a week. Probably a non-starter. But what about 162? Like baseball, or for that matter, forget 162, 100 or 120. Because if the case for not shortening the season is, well, we need all this inventory to make revenue, well, then why not stretch the schedule to its natural limits? And, okay, maybe your stars will only appear in 2/3 of the games, but look, baseball has survived for a century in a world where, hey, you buy a ticket, sometimes you see Clayton Kershaw, sometimes you see Kenta Maeda. Like the beer still flows, cars still park, food gets consumed, and you think the Lakers would have a problem with selling another 20, 25 games to their local broadcast partner? But I also think it's fair to say that, strictly from a logistics and facility standpoint, 100, 120 is an impossibility, to say nothing of the player health risks. Now, in recent years, there have been 2 primary arguments for shortening the season. The first is player health. And, I think we can now safely say, looking at the best practices of the smartest teams, or for that matter, the dumb teams too now, that they've determined that 82 games is too many. I mean, this is why we just shrug now, when the greatest basketball talents in the world voluntarily sit out games that matter. I mean, let this percolate in your brain for a second. In the NBA, it is advisable for the stars who drive the value of the product to not play. In the NBA, teams voluntarily increase the likelihood that they will lose a game, sitting the stars that the customers want to see. And why? Because the cost of that loss is less than the risk associated with that star playing. And in the NBA, the more committed you are to winning, the more committed you are to this practice. I mean, I can't think of any other product in the world that's like that. Like, the fact that this condition is a reality in the NBA is absolutely absurd. Now, the second argument is what I call the scarcity argument. And this is the notion that fewer regular season games would just make for a more appealing product. And because mathematically, if there are greater values to each win, the games matter more, and fewer games would give us greater parity. And this is a long-stated goal of NBA owners, right? I mean, fewer games means randomness plays a greater role in a team's overall record. This is a good thing. Teams hang around the playoff race for longer. And in just fewer games comes greater anticipation. The game becomes an event. More drama, more urgency, more tension. Now, I think there's a lot of overlap to these arguments, right? I mean, player performance would improve if there were fewer games because, A, they'd be better rested and healthier, but also because they'd be more motivated. I always like to look at LeBron James as a case study in this. On his way to the 2016 finals, LeBron played in only 16 games over a 57-day period. And you saw the results. I mean, in short, this is what an elite NBA athlete looks like if you ask him only to play twice a week. Can we get that to be a permanent condition in the NBA? I don't know. Now, I think the case for player health, it's vital, it's important, it's moral. But today I want to focus largely on how a shorter schedule is good for business and can be good for business. It also seems to be the argument that high-level folks around the league are much more responsive to than the health argument, and I get that. Player health, the science of performance can seem very arcane and inaccessible to everybody but the highest level specialists. And I do think there's a sense among a lot of these people, if you want to demand this preventative health measure and shorten the season, it sounds like this expensive nanny state regulation. And scarcity, it's a market-based argument. Now, there's a point somewhere on the demand curve where NBA revenue can be maximized. We think it's 82 games. I don't know. Nobody knows. I mean, how can anyone possibly penetrate the brains of the millions and millions of people who compose the global audience for the NBA and predict their behavior? I mean, for instance, if we gave fans 16% fewer games, but those games were more meaningful and more exciting, would the audience for these televised events be 18, 19% larger? I don't know. Nobody knows. Now, I always find it helpful to steelman my argument when I make one. That's steelman being the opposite of a straw man. Try to come up with the best counter argument. And I think an opponent of shortening the season might say something like this, which is, look, Kevin, you're asking teams to voluntarily reduce their revenue by 15, 20, 25%. And any way you slice it, that's fewer dollars at the gate. That's fewer games to give to your local broadcast partners to sell. And overall, listen, in a few short decades, the NBA has gone from being a distant third sport in this country. I mean, a sport where, in my lifetime, finals games were broadcasted on tape delay. And now, this is a league that has $8 billion in annual revenue, a league where every franchise is valuated at over $1 billion, so don't worry so much. I think there is reason to worry. I think the world and the people in it are changing in ways that make this 82-game schedule very, very dangerous in the future. And in thinking about this, I always come back to some comments made by John Landgraf. And, Landgraf is the guy who runs the FX network. He sort of established himself as the industry's public intellectual and thoughtful contrarian on all things television. He came up with the term peak TV. And this is what he said. He said this in 2015, there is simply too much television. And when he said it, a lot of people in the TV industry thought he was being an alarmist. Come on, I mean, TV's in a golden age. Everybody's binge watching everything. But he keeps doubling down. And in 2016, he said, quote, "We're at our unit capacity of what we can really pay attention to." And then just a couple of weeks ago, he said, "Everything feels vaguely familiar." I think he's speaking to something very real and something that should be very concerning to the NBA, and that's this. There is a fight going on for your attention. And the thing about attention is, it is a zero-growth industry. So they're going to make 500 TV series this year. Say nothing of, that's scripted, nothing of reality shows, movies on demand, streaming services, Instagram stories, YouTube clips, and yes, live sporting events. They're not making any more attention. You know what else feels vaguely familiar? The NBA regular season. I mean, you feel the deadness in the arena. Everybody in the league, coaches, players, execs, talk about scheduling losses. Like, this is a real thing. It was a matter of fact. You know who else thinks the NBA regular season games are pretty meaningless? The players. And if you don't believe me, ask them when the recorders aren't on and the cameras aren't on, because they will tell you. And look, maybe this is why ratings for NBA regular season games are down 10% on regional sports networks this season. They're down 8% nationally. But wait a minute. The NBA is a 12-month sport. The NBA is bumping the NFL off the front page on Super Bowl week. Well, congratulations. You're winning Twitter. Everybody's abuzz about your aggrieved superstars. And meanwhile, that guy who's spending his lunch hour on social media dishing about Anthony Davis, he's going home at night and he's watching Making a Murderer, not the NBA. Like it or not, the product is still king. And just to be clear, the NBA is doing quite well. They have a natural advantage that even the best Netflix series doesn't have, which is it is a live event. And look, for all I know, maybe that's enough to fend off the competition in future years. Maybe the 69% of people under the age of 18, between the ages of 18 and 29 who don't have cable or satellite subscriptions, maybe they'll just download the app or pay the a la carte fee in the future for your regular season game. But personally, I think for that to happen, the NBA is going to need a more compelling regular season product. And in that regard, I think they can learn a thing or two from television over the past 30 years. I mean, you now have Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, HBO, all the traditional networks where 30 years ago you just had 3 choices. I mean, to put this in perspective, take a show like Bonanza. That was like the big drama in the 60s. The episode order per year was like 30 to 34 episodes. And then a few years after that, TV kind of settles on 22 episodes in a season for your leading sitcoms and dramas. And it worked very well, because in an era with only 3 or 4 networks producing original programming, that was great. The A-Team, 42 million viewers a week. on Tuesday nights in 1984. I mean, to put that in some sort of contrast, the highest rated NBA game ever, Game 6, 1998, finals, 36 million viewers. And look, I'm not knocking the NBA. I'm not trying to embarrass the NBA here. I love this game. My point is that resting your laurels on an 82-game schedule, it's very 1980s thinking. You know, I think there's simply too many appealing ways to spend one's evening these days to live in that world for much longer. And HBO gets this, and they've gotten it for a long time. The Sopranos, Sex and the City, these were the shows that ushered in peak TV. They did huge numbers, even though they were on premium pay cable. Today you got Game of Thrones. Every episode is an event. It is the definition of appointment viewing. Last season's premiere drew 26 million viewers. That's more than every finals game of the last 5 years, except for Game 7 in 2016. But what's interesting is Game of Thrones produced only 10 episodes each of its first 6 seasons. And then despite being one of the most successful dramas in cable history, for season 7, they dropped this order from 10 to 7. And what happens? Viewership goes up 33%. I mean, this is the largest year-over-year increase for this show in its history, when they go down from 10 episodes to 7. Coincidence? Maybe. The final season premieres in a few weeks. They're going to give you only 6 episodes. So just let's consider this for a second. HBO has this NFL-level hit, right? And yet they willfully deny the product to their viewers 42 weeks out of 52, then 45 weeks out of 52, and now this season, 46 out of 52 weeks. What's going on here? Wait, drama went from being a 30-episode-a-year thing down to 22, down to 13, and now we're like at 10 and under. Just when TV got really good, they gave us a lot less of it. And maybe less is more. Okay. Shortening the NBA season, easier said than done, I know. And I'm just going to put this out there right now. We're going to sacrifice some revenue in the near term for a much, much, much healthier future. Let's start with the largest source of revenue for the NBA, and that's the global broadcast contract. This is what you know is like the 9-year, $24 billion deal. And this composes more than a third of the league's revenue. And I got great news for you. Shortening the season requires no reduction in the slate of national games whatsoever. But here's what the networks are going to get. They're going to get those games on Wednesday, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays that are more meaningful. Games in which players are considerably better rested, much less likely to be sidelined by injury, more motivated, if you believe Kobe Bryant and Damian Lillard, and probably playing more minutes. So I mean, let's just settle this. We're not only going to protect the most valuable asset the NBA has, we're going to enhance it. Your largest revenue stream that represents almost 40% of your revenue is about to get better. Now, can I say for certain that more meaningful games that are more exciting will motivate rights holders to pay a little bit more? I can't tell you that for absolute certainty, but I'm confident that when you take into account everything I just said and just the basic laws of scarcity, that there will be a measurable uptick in what they'll pay. Even if it's, say, 7%. That's $187 million annually based on the current contract. Oh, you can't get more than 5%? That's $103 million. And we're going to need that money, so stay tuned. Let's run through the other revenue buckets. Tickets and suites represent 29% of NBA revenue. Had a really interesting conversation with an NBA owner a few weeks ago. He thinks 70 games is the right number. And I said, well, what about, how do you count for season tickets? He's like, because the people who sit downstairs and in those suites and the premium products, that's where the revenue comes from. He's like, those people are going to pay the same amount for 33 or 35 games than they will for 41. They don't buy 41 sets of tickets. They buy the season as a unit. And he's like, you will not believe the number of times season ticket holders in town come up to me and say, there are too many games. I don't need to be at the arena 5 times in a 12-day period. Now, are we going to raise the average ticket price in this new world? Yeah, we are. And teams do this all the time to account for demand. This is a league that a third of whose teams are reporting 100% occupancy at the arena. And this makes sense. People used to get their TV dramas for free. You flipped on the TV on Thursday night, there was LA Law. Okay, great. Now, all of you are wrapping up hundreds of dollars in annual subscriptions to watch stuff that you could use to get for free. And why? Because peak TV, the quality of the product demands it. Now, in the arena, which is less than 10%, teams that do own their buildings and derive significant revenue from food and beverage, they're going to take a little hit. But here's what I'm going to do. When you talk to people who run these teams, they will tell you they hate Monday nights and they hate Tuesday nights. There is a significant drop-off in revenue. Nothing pains a team CEO more than getting that schedule in August and seeing Monday night blocks. So we're going to make the league dark on Monday nights. No more basketball on Mondays. We're going to take away the least profitable product in the arena that the league has and get rid of it. Merch and sponsorship, 10% of revenue. I think it's difficult to argue that a reduction in the regular season schedule will result in a change either direction. I mean, I think you could argue, especially in terms of merch, that if you have a more compelling product and the superstars are on the floor and playing more intensely and looking more like LeBron circa 2016, that you might be more likely to buy a jersey, but I can't say for sure. Now we come to the most difficult bucket of revenue for me to negotiate, and that's local broadcast revenue. Now, for the mid-level team that gets $25 million a year in broadcast revenue, it's not huge. We're talking about $4 or $5 million. The problem comes, as problems always do, when you come to the Los Angeles Lakers. They earn $150 million a year annually on their local broadcast contract with Spectrum Sportsnet. And so, if we reduce the schedule by 15, 20%, we're talking about as much as $30 million. Now, I think that's before, again, you account just like the global and national contract that I think more meaningful games will command greater viewership. I don't think that's Pollyanna-ish thinking. I mean, I think it's a likely consequences of the laws of supply and demand. But whatever way you cut it, we need to find some money for the Lakers. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 2 new products that the NBA can sell for global and digital distribution. We've been talking about them for years. Let's get them done. The first is a mid-season tournament. The second are playoff games or play-in games for the 7 and 8 seeds in each conference, which, by the way, also has the benefit of improving the gate revenue and in the arena revenue for teams that are on the bubble and in the mix, because when a team gets eliminated in late February, revenue falls off extremely. So this will help with that. I also want to start the season sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas. You talk to every business side exec in this league, and they will tell you, why are we going up against NFL football, college sports, and high school sports in fall when we could be going up against baseball in the dog days of summer? My point here is there are revenue streams available. There are products that do not exist that are available to the league if they will shorten and reform their schedule. And I think this is how you get to peak NBA. And that's what the NBA should be aspiring to put the premium product on the floor, not just the last 6 weeks of the postseason, but from the very start of the season. And I've presented that directive here as a means for survival, and I really believe that. I think young generations are far too distracted by choice for the NBA to continue to roll out what you see on a Tuesday night in January. I just don't think it's going to wash for much longer in this marketplace. It's too dangerous. But I think there's a larger imperative here, and it's this. The NBA at its best is a beautiful product. Everybody in this room knows that. You wouldn't be here. The NBA should aspire to have the best version of itself on display every single night. They can tweak the on-court rules. They can toy around with the schedule. But the best answer in the future and presently is scarcity. Now, to be clear, shortening the schedule will not maximize profits in the first 12 or 16 quarters of the fiscal calendar. I concede that. What I'm talking about are the 50, 60, 80, and 100 quarters after that. I think the NBA should bet on itself, on its best self. It should aspire to give fans, season ticket holders, broadcast partners, and sponsors peak NBA. Thank you. Do we have questions? How much time do we have for questions? Oh, God, I got to endure 7 minutes? Okay, I can do that. John Hollinger.
You have a question every small market team is going to have to be short of the schedule. How do you ensure you get the Golden States and Lakers into our building every year? Because we don't just sell that game.
Right.
We sell packages around that game.
No, I know. Listen, I mean, when Steph Curry is on the floor in an arena like Memphis or other small markets, that's an additional $800K in revenue over, say, the Pacers coming in on a regular night, and that's real. Here's what I want to do. I mean, I think by doing this, you could actually, you might lose. So you might lose an Eastern Conference, Giannis, if he becomes what we think he becomes. You might lose Giannis. Every 4th year, you might you might lose a Steph game every 3rd or 4th year now with this. But what I could do is get Steph on the floor for another couple of years. This is a world now where guys can play longer. I mean, if a season's 66 games, 64 games, what if we get 2 extra seasons of Steph? So if the NBA the world over, that's another 128 games of Steph. That is times 800,000. Well, it's only road. I mean, that's an extra $100 million of revenue because Steph can play 2 seasons longer. I mean, that's the other thing. And it's kind of tricky because I think the scarcity argument and the health argument are kind of intertwined. I haven't gotten anywhere with the health argument, so I'm trying this argument. Because I really do, but I think that's the answer. The answer is, yeah, you know what, Memphis, you're going to lose. You're going to get, for the next 5 years, you're going to have Steph 1 fewer times. That's going to cost you $800K. But on the back end, Steph's going to play till he's 40 now because he's going to be healthy and his ankles are going to hold up because you're not asking this guy to play an unreasonable amount of minutes, well over 3,000 minutes when you count for the playoffs. So that's sort of my thing. I don't have certain answers, but I think longevity of the player is a big part of this to me. Is I want to see the guys who truly drive revenue play longer, so we get them for an extra 130, 140, maybe even 180, 190 games.
Talked a lot about sort of the games and shortening that. I think probably just having less back-to-backs would reduce the injuries. But the product itself, don't you think more player commentary, player narration, the whole players-only phenomenon, that seems like even if Steph's not playing, if he were narrating the game or Draymond were narrating the game, you'd get a lot more interesting product.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there are all kinds of things the league can be doing. I mean, it's one of the things the play-in game. We're going to lose revenue if we shorten games. I concede that. I mean, you're going to have fewer hot dogs sold. You're going to have, the Lakers have fewer games sold. I mean, what can we do to improve their? I was just thinking. I was talking about this last night with a colleague that I don't know any other product where, it's just understood that the median game is not really the real game. You don't turn on your favorite TV show and say, episodes 5, 6, and 7, they're just going to kind of phone it in. The NFL doesn't do that. I mean, baseball, for all of its problems, it's just, I can't think of another problem. You go into a restaurant and it's the chef's kind of phoning it in on Mondays and Tuesdays. Dog Day's a winner, you're just going to get kind of 60% of that meal, in terms of excitement and quality. It's just it's something we just all concede that the NFL is going to be kind of crappy. Or the NBA, rather, is going to be kind of crappy in, early March. Okay. Everyone's kind of phoning it in. Why? The problem is, maybe there's just too much of it. But, I think there are all kinds of products, whether it's the playing game, whether it's a tournament, whether, whatever it is. But they need – I just don't think in a world where all those shows are piled up on the screen that someone's going to say, Hornets Nets. Yeah, that's a product I really want to see on March 5th. Who's saying that? Nobody. Why? That's a great players on the floor. Yeah, I mean, we should all be looking for ways to kind of come up with new products and revenue streams.
I guess it's interesting to note that Major League Soccer just shortened the playoffs for the next season.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They've gone from two-game series to now one-game elimination for 2 rounds. Any other leagues you see doing anything like that in terms of reducing schedule?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. Major League Baseball has determined they want more. I think it's an interesting strategy. I mean, NFL to me, scarcity is sort of is king. Why did soccer state that they were doing that? Did they offer a reason? That they just wanted a more intensive product. I mean, I just think that's the thing with the future. I mean, I just think that the marketplace is just too loaded right now for volume to be the answer for anybody.
What do you think is the biggest barrier to the NBA adopting a flex scheduling strategy like the NFL has? And if you just assume that ESPN was willing to reimburse local broadcasters to flex a, Thunder Nuggets game to ESPN, what's sort of the league? Why is the league against it?
Well, they do. I mean, I get emails all the time, and I think those in the press and this thing do schedule change. And is there anybody in the league, Evan, or anybody can tell me? I mean, they will swip game. I got an email the other day that they were no longer showing the Dallas at Miami or something, and instead we're getting one of the surprising teams that's sort of up and coming. So I do think the NBA is fairly flexible in its prerogatives. I mean, is that true? Yeah, I get those emails from Thomas all the time. So they are, I think, flexing it just kind of quietly.
How would you expect this to affect ticket prices?
They'll go up.
Significantly?
I think in terms of average ticket price, if a person downstairs between the lines is going to pay the same amount for 33 games as they would for 41 games, I mean, that would suggest to me that ticket price goes up essentially per ticket at least, about 20%. I mean, the thing about it is we talk about, you'll have to raise ticket prices. These teams raise ticket prices all the time. Every time. I mean, watch what's going to happen in Milwaukee next year. They're going to raise ticket prices. They'll have to be quiet about it, but they do it. I think ticket prices should correspond to demand. And I think at the end of the day, maybe not in the first 4 to 5 years, but I think there will be just there will be a corresponding increase in ticket prices. I mean, part of the problem with having this conversation is I don't have any data. I've never lived in a world where, and everyone's like, oh, well, the shortened season in 66 games in 2011, that was different. That was just too concentrated. Like, I don't know. We don't have a parallel universe or a simulation where we can run, hey, the current length of time, but just only pack it with 64, 66, or 70 games. Like, I mean, that's what's so difficult about this exercise. I concede I don't have empirical data. I just don't. I'm just looking around. No, I think the players' union will be a major impediment to this unless you can show them, look, revenue will over time increase. I mean, everyone is everyone's kind of in the same boat in that respect, right? Like, more revenue means more revenue for owners, more revenue for players. I mean, I think the players are, and I spoke to one vice president of the union who would love to see fewer games, and the minute I say, would you be willing to sacrifice revenue in the next 4 years, he says, absolutely not. I mean, they're going to be tough. I am ambitious, but I also know that there are forces that will oppose this virulently. I mean, I concede that. I'm sorry, I can't.
The shorter regular season can improve the global market. Like you can put a game, play in China or play in Japan or play in Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, listen. One of the things you can do with a shorter season is you've got time now, right? Like you can pause and, if it makes sense, to have a full slate in China over a 2-week period, kind of a real expo, like not just kind of pop in for a game. You have time to do that now. I mean, I think a schedule that is more spread out and more amenable to human performance and just sleep and flying and accountable for all those things can be a world where, we've got some days on the calendar to fool around. Let's have a midseason tournament. Let's have an expo in China. Let's go down to Mexico, not just, pop in with the Kings and the Celtics, but actually really, I mean, again, you can create all kinds of new products if you've got the breathing room to do it in the schedule. Right now, they're just content to make sure that the product is a back-to-back with the Magic and the Heat. And that's their solution for, we've got time on the calendar. Let's just pack it in with the same mediocre product that we've been rolling out.
Do you know the viewpoint of the networks and how they'll attempt to balance the revenue that will be lost from dead Bolton?
Well, the good news is, for my employers, I hope they're listening, this doesn't affect it at all. Like, you'll still have a Wednesday night doubleheader. You'll still have a Friday night doubleheader. You'll still have the Saturday game. The only difference is the game's just much more meaningful. Paul George is much more likely to play. Like, it's more likely to have playoff implications. I mean, that's the great news, is that the largest source of revenue, as let me just point out, is that global contract. We're talking about somewhere between 35 and 40%. They get every single game they've got now, except that game is mathematically 20% more meaningful. Like, you have more of a playoff atmosphere. And so I would hope that the networks will be like, yeah, so basically we get the same number of games. The games are more meaningful. The stars will probably go from playing 33 minutes a game to back to 39 or 40. Sounds good to us. I mean, I would think the networks would love this. Regional sports networks, I got to work on that. I mean, that to me is the big. It's more the local folks, not the national folks. Where are we on time? One more? Oh, I'm being told that means stop. Okay, thank you.